Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and the YouTube channel. And I'm really excited to be here. My name is Art Burns. I'm excited to be here with you, and I'm so excited that you're there watching this video and listening to this podcast right now. I can't tell you how grateful and how gratified I feel that people are getting some benefit out of these videos that I make and these podcasts that I put out. Actually, just this morning I got another email from someone who's a listener and a watcher, and and I just every time it's just so exciting for me to interact with people who are out there. I don't know most of you personally. I don't know really that you're there or you're not there. I'm just kind of speaking into this camera and putting it out there. And so when I get messages from people, it really does brighten my day. Whether it's just something to say, "Hey, thanks for the videos," or it's something more, question oriented, which is really something that I really welcome. Okay, the questions, I mean, and I want to point out to you that I actually work with a couple of coaches myself, and I actually just had a meeting with one of my coaches this morning, and this is someone who helps me coaching through some of like the copywriting kind of stuff that I have to do for my work here. And one thing that she mentioned during our call that reminded me something I've heard before, but it's really important message is that if you have a question about something, you can be absolutely sure that someone else has that question too. If not that exact question, then something very similar. Or, and this is something I always, when I have run group coaching in the past, I always try to explain this to people, is that by you asking a question, right, you don't, there are other people who hear your question and they didn't even realize that they had that question too, right? Like they didn't even know what they don't know about whatever you asked about, right? So the reason I mention that, right? And sometimes, sometimes these questions inspire a whole video or a whole podcast episode on the subject that you're asking about, right? And so the reason I bring this up to you is because I want you to look at, asking questions is not just something that is self-directed. A lot of times I know how it gets, right? I know that, people think like, oh, this question's not important. It's a silly question. I don't want to waste any time. They don't want to hear me, ask this question. This isn't going to benefit anyone, right? Well, none of that could be further from the truth. First of all, I really do enjoy, I really do enjoy interacting with everyone who I get to interact with on this podcast and this video channel. But more importantly, okay, and of course, secondly, it's important for you to get the answer, even if it's something that you consider a silly question, right? It's important, okay? Anything is important. That any question that you have is important because it's important to you. And if it's important to you, then it's important to me too. So please ask the question. I want to make sure that you're clear on these things. I do these videos to help. And if you have a question about something, then obviously it's not as helpful as it could be with the answer to that question, okay? So for your own benefit, please ask the questions. For my benefit, ask the questions. And now for everyone else's benefit, right? Ask the question. And so in this way, I want you to kind of, I invite you rather to sort of reframe the notion of what it means to ask a question and see it as an act of compassion, as an act of altruism, right? Because it is. It is, because by you reaching out, whether you're doing it in the comments on the YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook or LinkedIn or I guess on the podcast, I don't think you can actually leave comments on the podcast, but if you send me an email with a question, I'll talk about it, and so this is it's something that could really benefit someone else. And so I want you to consider that. If you have this question that you're kind of, thinking, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to bother anybody. I'm shy. I'm nervous. I don't want to do it. Please, please. It is so worth it. Okay. And as you know, I mentioned a lot of people here who get in touch with me, right? And I never give out any names, right? Unless you tell me that you want me to give you a shout out on the channel here or in the podcast. Otherwise, I won't do it. I will keep you private. So please don't feel like you're gonna be in the spotlight or something and get all nervous that way, right? So that's just a little PSA, a little public service announcement for everyone, okay? So if you have any questions, please do ask them, all right? For all three of those reasons, right? For me, for you, for everyone, for the whole world, right? And as you know, I talk about this a lot. You know, altruism and compassion are very, very good for you. So if you ask a question knowing that somebody else might benefit from it, then that's a fourth reason to do it, because that is going to help you, okay? Um, yeah, so if you have any questions, please do ask, okay? So now that I've gotten through that, what I wanted to talk about today was, again, on the theme of talking to people about mindfulness and meditation, I am blessed that I get to talk to a lot of people about mindfulness and meditation, right? Since you can tell that it's like my favorite subject in the world, it's something I feel very, very fortunate to be able to have these conversations with people, like a lot, and I mean not even as many as I hope to, but a lot, and so I feel like 90 some percent of the time I open the conversation with a very simple question, right? And I ask the question just to kind of get a bearing of where we're at. I ask people, or whoever it is that I'm on the phone with, or on a video chat with, I ask them, do you have experience with meditation and mindfulness practices? Right? Or maybe I'll ask it like, how much, what kind of experience do you have? How much experience, something along those lines, right? And honestly, I was very surprised at first that I would hear the word yes a lot to that. I was really kind of assuming when I got into this coaching and stuff, because it took me so long to introduce myself properly to meditation and mindfulness practices, I kind of assumed that was the case with most people. I kind of figured that most people had no experience, just like I used to have no experience, right? But in fact, it's quite the opposite. Almost everyone who I asked that question to, maybe not everyone, but like 90 something percent of the people who I asked that question to, they answer very specifically. Okay, some form of yes, I have an app that I listen to when I get very stressed out, right? And as you've heard me talk here before, maybe you haven't noticed that I've said this before, but I have said it plenty of times before. And I say this to every single client that I work with, before I start working with them, after I start working with them, during working with them. There's nothing wrong with an app. Right? There's nothing at all wrong with an app. I am not here to tell you that the apps are worthless. I am not here to tell you that they don't work. I'm not here to tell you there's a better way. Well, maybe I'm here to tell you there might be a better way, but I'm never here to bash the app. Right? Nor am I here to bash the various devices that seem to be coming out now. I just heard recently, actually from my coach, that I met with this morning, that apparently there's this headset out now that gives you, some sort of guided meditation and gives you biofeedback while you're doing it and stuff. Hey, listen, I mean, if that floats your boat, I mean, go for it. In my mind, the meditation practices that I talk about, they're 2,500 years old, right? And back 2,500 years old, 2,500 years ago, there were no apps, there were no headsets, there was no biofeedback or anything like that. So I don't see it as something absolutely necessary. But if it's something that, like, if you're a gadget-oriented person and that's like the thing that you want, then absolutely go for it. However, if you're talking about spending a good deal of money, maybe you want to have a conversation with someone first. Like if money is a little tight, before you go and drop $100 or something on this headset that's supposed to make meditation so magical, well, maybe you want to talk to somebody like me first, because again, I don't see those things as absolutely necessary in any case. Right? And in fact, this is what I'm going to talk about today is how those apps, while they are very beneficial, they can sometimes be like, there's a certain level of benefit that you get from them, and then there's nowhere to go above that, right? The kind of work that I talk about here enables you to really reach heights that an app can't do for you, right? So, but again, this is not about what's wrong with the app, it's more about what's right with meditation and mindfulness practices. So putting the apps beside us, one of the things that I do praise about people who use an app. And generally speaking, the way it goes is that, okay, when I get very tense or anxious or stressed out or whatever's happened, if I can't sleep or what have you, then I'll do my meditate. I'll go and grab my app, I'll put on a meditation and I'll do it, right? And the thing that's important, and it relieves, right? There's no question that it provides relief, right? If you're feeling very stressed and tense and your heart's racing, your blood pressure's high, and you're feeling very, sort of triggered, doing a 15-minute app of a guided meditation is going to bring you down, and that's going to be a beautiful thing for you, right? And that's the thing, right? And that's what I really want to kind of talk about today in this video is that, and in this podcast, is that, what those apps are doing, which is very valid and very important, but what they are doing is they're allowing you to reach a state of presence, a state of calm, a state they are shifting your state of an aroused sympathetic nervous system and bringing it down to a calm parasympathetic nervous system. Like that's the thing that's happening, right? It's putting you into a state. Whether you want to call that a state of relaxation, you want to call it a state of bliss, you want to call it a state of zen, you want to call it a state of, that's a little bit misleading, that last statement, but that's what a lot of people call it, right? Like they say, oh, I'm zenning out to my Headspace app today, and I feel so zen after I do it, I get it, and it's fine. I mean, the vernacular, I'm not worried about it, but the thing is, and it's really important to get into that state. Whether you do it by a self-guided meditation or you do it by a guided meditation that you're plugging in headphones for, right? But it's very important to get into that state because as I've talked about here a lot, right? The brain, all of our brains, right, work on a process of association, right? And so if you never get into that state, then your brain simply doesn't believe that you can possibly get into that state. And so therefore, any efforts that you make to get into that state are going to be obstructed, right? And going to be, you're not going to have the resources of your brain's power behind you. If anything, your brain's going to be resisting it, right? And not believing it and kind of distracting you or motivating you to not do it in some way, right? And so that's why it's really, really, really important to get into that state from time to time, right? Or at least in the beginning, right? To understand what that feels like, And that state can happen in a lot of different areas of life. I remember while I was, preparing for this video earlier, I remembered a client of mine about 6 months ago or so, sometime during the nice weather. I mean, California. She lives in California, so it's always nice weather out there. But it was during the warm season where things were growing, and she was watering her garden, and she sent me this email that said that when she and she had done no meditation. I think actually she was the kind of person who had like an app or listened to YouTube videos here and there, but no real firm or solid base of regular meditation practice. Just to show you how quickly this can happen, right? That after just a few weeks of doing these practices, she was watering her garden, and she said that she sent me this email that said, like, I found myself like staring at the droplets of water on a flower petal, and I got so present with this moment of just looking at this water on this flower petal, and it's like the whole world just dropped away, and all there was in the entire world was this water droplet. And it felt like, she described something that was almost like somewhere between an intensely spiritual experience and like a mushroom trip or something like that, but and she was so grateful for it. And I was like, I still just got goosebumps thinking about this email that she sent, because that is that state, right? She got into that state, and it happened just like randomly. I mean, one of her assignments was, watering the garden mindfully. So it was part of the process, but and that's what I'm going to get to in a second. But the state that it just arose just from seemingly nowhere, right? And that's how it happens. It happens very spontaneously sometimes, right? And so that's beautiful, right? And again, it's really important to get yourself familiar with that state, right? Or a state that's kind of like that, right? It's very, very helpful to this process, right? Because again, once it becomes familiar to your brain, now your brain, and this is what I always tell my clients, is that after a couple of weeks, what's happening is, it's becoming so familiar with your brain that your brain is now like, okay, I want more of that, and then at that point, the routines and all that stuff that we talk about, become less important because your mind and your body tell you, like, okay, it's time to do meditation, and again, I'm getting chills, just, goosebumps just talking about this, because it's so wonderful when we get to that place. And that's the point that I want to make right here in this video that and podcast, is that there is this state of presence, this state of, again, bliss, zen, whatever you want to call it, right? There is that state of being that we get to when we do meditation. I get into it daily. Everyone who meditates gets into that state, right? And it's beautiful. But when we talk about meditation practice and we talk about mindfulness, right? It's a little bit more to talk about a process as opposed to a state, or as one of the very first people I ever studied with in this work, who is not even a professional meditator or anything. He's a doctor, an MD, Dr. Dan Siegel, in one of the first seminars I ever attended, as I was learning how to teach this work to people. He said that what we do with mindfulness practices is we go from a state to a trait. Right? And that's what we're going for here, right? Again, it's part of a process in which, mindfulness becomes this process through which everything in the world kind of passes, right? So that the the practice and the state of that bliss state that we talk about, right? That relaxation that we talk about becomes far less impactful, because what we're really doing is we are, from moment to moment to moment to moment in our lives, every single present moment, we are meeting it with mindfulness, right? We are being present. We are turning towards it. We are, letting everything in. Right? So it really does become like this whole different way of living. It's not just about like, oh, I'm feeling tense, so I got to plug in for 15 minutes and get myself relaxed, right? It becomes less about, bringing yourself down from this high level of stress, and it becomes more about maintaining a level, like, again, a trait, right? Where you're always present. So therefore, anytime any kind of stressor comes in or any kind of trigger of emotions happens to you, you are able to bounce back extraordinarily quickly. Right? And I mean very, very quickly, right? And the more you do this, the more it becomes, they say on a neuroscientific level, on a physiological level, that resilience to the point where it becomes just completely like part of the way your brain is wired, that takes some time, right? But what happens is your body recognizes it in like just a few weeks, right? So when you find yourself, because again, that's part of the whole process that I'm talking about, right? Is that as we practice this, right? When we practice meditation daily, not just when we're needed, right? But practicing it as a matter of a process, a daily practice, right? And we practice informally, just being present with what we're doing. Within a few weeks, what happens is, your awareness develops so deeply and so widely and so vividly that you recognize when that stress is rising, right? You see it in real time, almost like you see it ahead of time, right? Like you can, that little, tightness that you might get in your chest, or maybe a little heat in your ears, or maybe a little tension in your shoulders, right? Or maybe a little tension in your facial muscles, right? Or maybe any and all of the above, right? That when you start feeling that, it's automatic, where you say to yourself, okay, I've been triggered. this is not going to end. This is going to keep getting to where I'm, this is going to keep getting more intense until I feel really, really bad, and something, maybe I do something that's going to be, have some kind of negative consequences or something like that. And then, because of the trait that you've developed, and again, it's like within like a couple, like conservatively, like 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, that's what we're talking about, right? And so because of this trait that you've developed in 6 to 8 weeks, and some people a lot sooner than that, you're going to process that whole thing, the stressor and the stress it causes. You're going to process it differently. And so it just changes the whole thing, right? So instead of meditation becoming like a rescue kind of thing, right, where it's like, okay, I'm feeling tense and I need to relax. It's, I'm losing myself, whatever. I need to bliss out, instead of it becoming that kind of rescue thing, what it does is it becomes like a almost like a preemptive thing, like what do they call that? Maintenance. I can't remember. Preventative maintenance, right? It's like preventative maintenance, right? Like you do this to prepare yourself, right? To get to a place where when that stressor happens, when that difficulty arises, when that whatever comes up in life, because that's the one thing that life is always going to throw things at us. Like I told you the other day, John Kabat-Zinn's quote, right? Life becomes the curriculum. Right, another John Kabat-Zinn quote that applies here is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Right, and that's the essence of what we're talking about here. And in fact, I talked about this a few, maybe a week or two ago, where one Buddhist monk who I was studying, I've studied with him for, I mean, not personally, but like read and educated through him. But he refers to formal meditation as similar to charging the battery on a cell phone, right? That if you sit there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is that you do, even 5 minutes, even 1 minute, right? If you're doing that every day, what you're doing is you're building up this charge, right? Where now you go out into the world and now you apply that kind of sense or the sensibility of meditative qualities. You apply that to everything in your life. And so therefore you are more present. You are more accepting. You're easier to let go of things. You're finding yourself more compassionate, more curious. All the different things that I talk about, right? And so when we apply those traits, again, that's the word, right? It's a trait. When we apply those traits to every situation that we experience, well, then there's nowhere to get stressed. There's nowhere to become triggered. It doesn't happen anymore because it doesn't even apply anymore. And so it's really hard to understand that. And that's another thing that I always talk about is that there's only so much I can tell you with words, right? But every single one of my clients, after a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they say to me, they're like, I had no idea I was capable of feeling this and living this way. I had no idea. I hear that all the time, right? And so lastly, just to kind of summarize what I'm talking here about, a lot of people see meditation as this, again, it's like a tool to kind of find your bliss, right? Or find your, again, the Zen, which is kind of a misplaced word, or misplaced. You never misplace the word Zen, but that it's a misuse of the word Zen, I think. But anyway, instead of looking at it as something that is, a tool to find that level of bliss or that relaxation, right? It's much more constructive and much more accurate to look at a daily meditation practice along with informal meditation practice, which again I talk about here a lot, which is as simple as, when you're driving your car, really paying attention to driving your car. It doesn't mean you can't ever have the radio on, right? But it does mean that you're present with what you're doing. And this can also not just be your car, it could be washing dishes, taking a shower, eating, cooking, walking, exercising, just 95% of the things that you do, you can do with mindfulness. And so when we look at the process in this way, right, the daily meditation, the formal meditation where you sit for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, and the informal practices that I just listed, which the list is much longer than that, it's much more fruitful and accurate to look at this process more akin to working out every day than it is about getting a massage every week because you're tense, right? I feel like that's the way people tend to talk about it, especially when they say, oh, I have the app, I have this app or that or this device and that thing, and when I'm feeling like I need it, I go to it, right? Like that's like getting a massage, right? Like my back hurts, I'm tense, I'm sore, I can't relax myself, let me go and spend an hour lying down and have somebody knead all my muscles. Sounds really good right now, by the way. And that feels great, right? But then what happens, right? After that, I start to tense up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then after a week or so, I'm going to need another massage, right? So it's maybe more fruitful to look at it as, I guess if we want to stay in the massage kind of vernacular and analogy, it would be more like learning how to stretch properly, right? Or perhaps like a daily yoga routine, right? Or again, maybe it's going to the gym to work your muscles so that you're more sound in your structure, so you don't feel the need for those massages so much. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's more fruitful and more accurate to look at a daily practice as something that you're doing to build a skill, right? You're building this foundational skill that is going to help you to avoid the symptoms that you would need. Like again, in this analogy, it would be a massage, right? So learning to stretch every day or spending time stretching every day so that you never need the massage, right? So we spend time meditating every day and doing these informal practices every day so that we never need to bliss out, because we never get to that point where we're like so hyper aroused anymore. And if we do, it's very easy now to just come back down. Like it's not like plugging in for 15 minutes and listening to a guided meditation. It's actually just taking like 3 or 4 breaths, and that could be enough, right? Because you've built the skill, right? So if you'd like to learn, please get in touch with me, okay? Because I would love to teach you. I love teaching people this work because, not only do I know how good it is for you, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it really is. Not just even beyond the stress and even beyond, there's no single thing that's more valuable than others. It's just as a whole thing, it is so valuable to do this, so beneficial to our bodies and our minds and our nervous system to do this work, right? So aside from knowing how much I'm helping people when I teach them this, that gratification that I get, again, like a week or 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks into the work, that aha moment that I get to watch time and time and time again, right? I get to see people say, I had no idea I could be this way. Like I had no idea life could be so sweet, is what they're saying. And it really can be. So if you'd like to explore this a little bit, let me know, okay? And even if you spent a lot of money on a headset, it's still worth learning how to do it this way too. All right, so if you'd like to have some information about that, or you'd like to schedule a first consultation, the consultations, the first ones are always on me. It's like I kind of, it's like I give you a little gift certificate and you meet with me for 45 minutes to an hour. We have a conversation and I can explain how this stuff works to you and how much it will benefit you. So if you'd like to do that, it's very simple. Okay, go to my website, artburnscoaching.com. There's a picture of a clock on there that says book a call. Just go into that. You go right into my calendar program. It's a 45-minute call. You just pick a time that works for you, a time in a day that works for you, and we'll be booked. Next thing you know, you'll get an email from me. We'll just exchange phone numbers, or arrange for a Zoom call, and we're off to the races. And everything after that is like easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So if you'd like to do that, I really invite you to do it. All right. So and as I told you, I'm working with a copywriting coach. So so look out for some great invitations for this as well, coming up very, very soon. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I wish you all well, and I hope to hear from every single one of you. I hope to hear from very soon. So talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. See ya.